大家好，看得到我吗？
看到了。
看到。大家好，非常荣幸，今天又来到我们的每周第二个星期日晚上的论坛，非常开心在这儿又跟大家见面了，因为好多次的论坛跟大家交流，非常开心。我也同时非常开心的发现我们的校长Maria 和我们的另外一位总监 Terry 随着我们这个音乐论坛讲座的好多期的这种成功的举办，我觉得你们的音乐造诣也在不断的攀升当中，真的是给我很大惊喜。现在在理论这个方面的观点，居然都赶超专业了啊！废话少说，今天非常非常开心啊，有这么一个机会，请到我们著名的大咖，哎，这儿真是我看到他的这个简历，非常厉害，很震撼啊！我们 Doctor Edward Smaldon，他是很厉害的，大家看得到的一位作曲家，是专攻作曲跟理论教学的。因为作曲跟理论教学是分不开的嘛，因为理论非常强，才可以延伸出作曲的这个能力。当然了，也不是所有的人学了理论就一定会作曲，因为作曲这个领域还是真的是非常非常深和非常很厉害的一个领域吧，我觉得都是大神。而且我们这位 Doctor 呢，他一生做了很多的曲子，然后呢很有名，被各个著名的乐团去演奏，而且呢会录制和发行，非常成功，而且很厉害。今天很荣幸的能够请到他，我觉得哎，我们大家真的洗耳恭听，希望今天晚上能解答所有学生跟家长们的疑问，让大家眼睛一亮，豁然开朗。下面我请出我们 Doctor 吧。Hi Doctor, Hi. Hi,
Hello.
Dr. Edward Smaldon. Here's the Shan Shan. I'm the
Hello,
director.
Shan.
Yeah, hi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I work in the education department in the Victoria Park, Victoria Music Academy. So we are on the one team of the education about the music. So my major was violin and the piano, as I
Wonderful.
teach a little bit theory to my students for
Very
many
good.
years. Yeah, actually, the theory is really, really big, lots of like really wide kind of like a world in the music. And also both my kids, my son and my daughter, are interested in writing songs on the piano. My daughter only 6 years old, and she wrote a composition already winning.
Wonderful.
Yeah, she already winning the 2022 international highlight concert.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah. Also, I have lots of students. They are wondering, like, I can play the instrument really well, but
hmm
I cannot create the music on my own.
Well, that's a whole that is an entire pursuit. That is an entire journey. I mean, the fact is that music theory is part of every musical experience that every musician has every time, whether they realize it or not. Much the same way that when you speak, you are using syntax, you are using grammar,
Yeah,
you are using rules. I put that in quotes, but
yeah,
there are ways that language works, and there are ways that language doesn't work. In
yeah,
order to express yourself, you must say the words in a way that is both grammatically correct
yeah.
and expressive. And that's the way music works as well. What happens is with so many young musicians, they learn to play the music, but they don't learn to understand what they're doing.
That's right.
And
That's
yeah, and music theory is a window into that, and I think it's a very valuable thing to study, even if you are not, even if you don't intend to be a composer. Composers absolutely need to know music theory because it would be like, if you wanted to build a car but you didn't want to learn how the engine works, it doesn't make any sense. You
exactly.
know.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. So it's great honor to invite you to be here. We are lucky
Thank you.
tonight to hear from you all those information and really deeply in my heart and all everybody's. So I
Wonderful.
think you're gonna bring the wonderful lectures for everybody.
Okay, well,
So yeah,
let's get
I'm here.
going.
Yeah, my kids is here and everybody here. Yeah,
Okay.
I also learn from you a lot of things.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I'll try to give everyone a little bit of a window into, how I think and how I approach things,
Yeah.
and hopefully, if people would like to work with me, I'd be very happy to have some students working with me, uh, sharing what I know. So,
Yes, if possible. I mean, yes,
great.
that will be great, great encouragement. Yeah.
Okay. So, should we go to the next slide?
Yeah.
This one, maybe you told people about me already. I think the next slide. I
Yeah, I
don't think
thought about you already. So everybody introduce you, we take turns.
everybody knows my whole story. Okay.
Yes,
Well, I will talk about that as well. So go to the next slide, and then we can skip to the one after that.
to the next slide. 下一个 slide.
That one, it just tells a little bit about some of the things that I've done. If students are really interested, all you'd need to do is a Google search of my name, and there are lots of websites and all sorts of things that explore the various things that I've done. Let's get to the next slide and start talking about the topic at hand. I can't see what the next one is.
Yeah.
There we are. Okay, so I've spent my entire life making music in many different ways, and what I have learned is that everything is ear training. When you are whether you're playing music or analyzing music or writing music, everything is the ear is the central part of all of those activities. So training your ear and doing things by ear is a very, very valuable exercise. The way that you do things by ear is to improvise. Every musician should know how to improvise. Every musician should be able to pick up their own instrument and play something without having to play Bach or Chopin or Mozart. You should be able to pick up an instrument, and the way that you can just open up your mouth and speak without reciting poetry or reciting a speech, you can simply speak. You should be able to speak on your instrument. And that also applies to analyzing music, understanding by ear how things are put together. So I'm a big advocate of ear training. And the second item there is something I live by. Music theory is everywhere. I mean, every musical expression is supported by and is held together by the relationships of the sounds. One sound follows another, and the way that those sounds make sense and communicate to an audience and provide expression and emotion is by the way that they are connected to each other. And that's something that we can look at and we can examine, and we call that music theory. So in order to do that, you need to learn a lot of things. You need to learn not only about your own instrument, but about other instruments. If you play the violin, you also must know about the piano. If you play the piano, you should know about the violin. And not that you need to know to play those instruments, but you need to know how they are written. What are the limitations? What are the strengths of each of the instruments? Can you open up a score and read all of the clefs and understand all of the transpositions? That a lot of that is technical stuff, but it's not that difficult. You just have to be introduced to it and practice a little bit. And then you can start to really understand what you're doing. And when you do understand what you're doing, your performance is better. If you know that you're playing the leading tone, you play it differently than if it's the seventh of the chord. You understand the difference between when you're playing a diminished seventh chord or you're playing the tonic. These are there's a different feeling of those different kinds of sonorities and understanding how even if you've only got one note, you need to listen to what the other musicians are doing so that you know how it all fits together and how your part fits into the whole. It's playing chamber music is an exciting aspect of teamwork, and you need to know what your role is on the team, but you also need to know what those other roles are. Let's go to the next slide. Yes. So when we explore and discover, there's a lot of different things that we would do in a lesson. The first thing to do is to start with simple rudiments, harmonic functions, voice leading, clef study, spelling things, spelling chords, learning how to write in 4 parts, learning how to take a musical technique, analyzing a context of a musical composition and reducing it to its fundamental musical attributes. That is to say that you can, can you play the basic chords of that piece of music? If I often refer to this as the imaginary continuo. If you were listening to a Beethoven symphony, can you listen to the symphony and play the chords? Nobody's playing the chords, but the symphony does have these basic sonorities that it can be reduced to. Learning how to see that and hear that is an important way of opening up a window onto understanding analysis. Another thing is learning to express yourself with improvisation. If you can improvise, you need to understand theory to improvise. That doesn't mean you can necessarily articulate the theoretical rules. A small child learns to speak in complete sentences. They learn to speak with a subject and a verb and an object. They don't know what those things are called, but they know that that's the way that the language fits together. So what I do is start with really simple exercises where the student just uses their ear. They use what they already know. And then if you learn to notate that, then we can look at it, and then we can discover what it is that you were doing in that improvisation. And then once you understand it, then the next improvisation is not a matter of guessing. Improvisation is not guessing. It's purposeful creation, and that's a wonderful thing to try. And then the next step after all of that would be to try to write an organized composition that is not spontaneous, but the best compositions do sound spontaneous, but that's because they're very, very carefully constructed. The way that a beautiful building can just look like like a flower arrangement. It can look so natural and beautiful, but it takes a lot of skill and science and architectural knowledge to build that thing. Let's go to the next slide. What's a good age to start music theory? Right now. Whatever age you're at is the perfect age to start with music theory. Very young children can learn to explore understanding the music that they are playing. If you're old enough to play, you're old enough to study music theory. Improvisation and learning to create are wonderful windows into the understanding of your own music. One of the things I love to do is to have students, play a piece of music and then improvise to that piece of music. So if you played, I don't know if this is going to work now. So here, if I played, it's a little excerpt from a Chopin prelude. But if I wanted to do... anybody that plays that piece ought to be able to do what I just did. Because all you need to do is understand what it is that Chopin wrote, and then you can expand on it. And then you can use that knowledge to try something else. Let's go to the next slide. Yes. The parents really, the best thing the parents can do is to encourage and to listen. It's a wonderful thing for students to play for their parents. So not only would they play their finished compositions, but they might also play their improvisations, so that the student learns to think on their feet. It's like having a conversation with someone where you're learning a new language and you are learning to speak in that language. The only way you learn the language is to practice it with other people. It's a very difficult thing to do. I'm very impressed with all of the people that I've met from the Victoria Company. Everybody speaks at least 2 languages, and I'm very impressed with that. That's a very challenging thing to do. The language of music is one that also needs to be practiced. Let's go to the next slide. So the process of understanding and analyzing theory, improvisation, and composition, all of these things prepare you for thinking on your feet, for thinking about the way things are combined. Contextual thinking of a relationship of one thing to another. It's simply part of a brain process that can then be applied to many other situations that have nothing to do with music. I think that the best musicians are really good critical thinkers. They understand how to take many different parts of a topic or of a situation and understand how they fit together. They are very good. Musicians tend to be very good at understanding what small part, their small role in a larger context, and understanding both the small role and the large context is really, that's a model for how society is supposed to get along. So we hope there's a lot that can be learned from music and from studying music that has nothing to do with music. But it's a very valuable pursuit. Let's go to the next slide. One of the things that I've done is that I have worked with lots of musicians who were composing for the first time. I have led a number of study abroad programs with Queens College. I'm a professor at Queens College at the Aaron Copland School of Music. And several times over the last 20 years, I've gone to Italy and to England and brought with me a group of American students, all of whom had never composed before. And in a matter of 4 weeks, what we did was, working many hours, we learned, we did some exercises in improvisation. We analyzed various pieces of music, and we performed and created a concert of original compositions. I'd like to play you just a little bit of an example. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, somebody has a hand raised. Are we going to ask a question now, or are we going to save that? Should we save that, Shanchan?
Yeah, we can save it.
Okay. Save your question. All right, I'm going to continue. Let me see. I want to share. I'm going to share my second screen. And I have this video here that I'm going to start, and we'll find out if it's just going to play or if it's going to give me a hard time. I don't know what it's doing. It just didn't cooperate. Let's try that again. There it goes. And first, unfortunately, we have to watch a short commercial.
Yes.
Check out this
For 5 seconds, we'll watch this.
Look at me.
And then, so here's this little example of some students the young woman at the piano wrote this piece. Now you can hear from this piece, especially the various things that she's doing inside, working inside the piano and creating these very complex clusters of sound, that she's experimenting with a very new kind of language of sound. But on the other hand, another young student in the same group wrote a composition that moves in a much more traditional manner. Here's another piece. Now, what I'm going to do at the end of this, we will provide all of the links to all of these videos that we show in the course. So if anybody wants to go and watch in more detail, you're welcome to do that. I play these two different examples just to give you an idea of one of the most important aspects of being a composer, and that is creating an individual voice. The point of becoming a composer is not so that you can sound like Chopin or sound like Xenakis or sound like Milton Babbitt or sound like Tandun. What you want to do is sound like yourself. And you have to, you need to explore a great deal of music and do a lot of self-discovery to learn what that's going to be. That's a hard part. But there's lots of other things that you can do along the way. The goals. The goals of a program like the one that I would provide will be useful, I feel, for anyone that's looking to study music in the high school, at the university, or at the conservatory. What I try to do with my students is teach them how to think. If I was running a restaurant, and then if I was running a cooking school, my goal would not be to teach you 50 recipes. My goal would be to teach you 15 or 20 techniques through which you could then create thousands of your own recipes. The goal is to learn techniques and ideas and learn how to manipulate things so that you can then go and use that in your own way. And I think when you learn to do that, it's a benefit if you think what you want to do is go to study at college, or if you're going to go into business, or learning to work with if you can work with musicians, you can work with business people. That would be a piece of cake. Musicians are difficult to work with, and it's what these students did, putting all of these different instruments together and organizing the final product, is a really challenging thing. And there are lots of different kinds of occupations that musicians, other than just, you can see the performer is here on this list, but you could be a composer, you could be an arranger, you could be a copyist, you could produce concerts. You could be in arts administration. There are many, many aspects that go into, you go to a concert and you sit in the audience and you look at people on stage playing the music and you think, well, that flute player had to practice all of those notes to play the right part. Yes, that's true. But there are so many other parts that go into making that production happen that you could be part of. In my own experience, I didn't start as a classical musician. I started as an improvising guitar player. When I was a young man, I played the guitar, and for a long time, I actually made, even as a not so young man, I actually made my living as a guitar player. I was a professional guitar player, and I was working all over New York City, and I couldn't read music. I was a guitar. There's an old joke that says that if you want the guitar player to turn down his amplifier, the electric guitar player, if you want him to turn down the amplifier, put music in front of him. He won't be able to read it and he'll stop playing. It's pretty close to the truth. But I did learn, I did realize when I was about 17 years old, I realized that I wanted to be serious about music, and I started to take piano lessons. And I think the fact that I learned so much of this later in life makes me very sympathetic to how students approach topics that they are unfamiliar with. When you try to learn something new, there's a whole process. I can't just tell you something. In order for you to absorb it, you have to, the synapses in your own brain have to fire and have to make connections. You have to make the connection. I can lead you to it, but you have to learn to make those connections. After I started playing the piano, I went to college and eventually earned a PhD in composition. So I'm a much more sophisticated musician than I was when I was not able to read music. But one of the things that was very important to me was that from the very beginning, I was an improvising musician. I was creating things. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was creating things. And that's a process that I think is very valuable for even the most schooled musicians to follow. What I would do in a class, I've got kind of two different ways that we can do this. One would be a kind of an amateur class. People that are interested but are not really pursuing music as a profession. They play, they are interested, and they want to, they want to increase their knowledge. Especially students, amateur students who struggle with often very simple compositions, understanding what you're doing can be a way of sort of pulling back the veil and making it simpler than you imagined it could be. When you understand what you're doing, you can, when you learn to improvise, if you can improvise, you get to make it up. You don't have to rely on playing exactly what's on the page. You can play your own version of things. And that's a really liberating way of making music. For a professional, let's go to the next slide. For a professional, we simply would delve deeper into the topics. We would cover things in more detail. We would expect that you would not only do keyboard exercises. I do a lot of keyboard exercises. You would improvise on the piano. You would improvise on your own instrument. You could learn figured bass and score reading and counterpoint and chromatic harmony. There's almost no end to what you can discover. And what I've been doing this for so long. I listen to a piece of music on the radio, and it seems that no matter what piece of music comes on, I go, "Ooh, that would be a good example to teach." Well, they're all good examples to teach because what we listen to on the radio are masterworks. These are all good examples of language, of the language of music. And when you study one or the other, it doesn't matter. So what I often do with a class like this is I have the students bring me music that they know, music that they are performing, that they have practiced many, many times. And what I try to do is to show them things in that music that were there all the time, all along, that are part of the fundamental musical aspects that are in all music. So that you learn to hear something that's very familiar with new ears, and that's a very exciting prospect, I think. Well, if somebody, I tell you what, I'm not going to do this right now, but we will provide you with these links if you are interested in hearing what my musical journey has led me to. You can look at these examples. We'll provide them for you. I can put them in the chat. I've got them all in a Word document. I just copy it. I can copy it right into the chat. Anybody can copy those over if they'd like, or you could just put my name into Spotify or YouTube or Apple Music or anything like that, and you will find some of the things that I have created. And I'd be very happy to hear from you if you happen to do that. All right. Well, do we have any questions? It's time for the questions. Who has a question?
Yeah, I believe, let me check. I have actually a couple of questions.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Just the first question I often from my students asking, most students, they are not perfect pitch. They are not a perfect pitch. So
I don't have perfect pitch.
Oh, really? Yeah, it doesn't matter, right?
No, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so because they asking, my ear is not perfect. Can I writing the very nice, like pieces of the music on the violin, on the piano, whatever? They always ask me, but I'm sure mostly people were concerned about that.
Yeah. I've done a great deal of teaching of ear training, and in fact, there's a very well-known ear training book called A New Approach to Sight Singing, and I'm one of the authors of the revisions. I've been doing the last 3 revisions of that book, so I'm very involved in ear training itself. Once again, I don't have perfect pitch. I have pretty good relative pitch, and I think that learning how to listen it's really important to start at the right place. I'm studying a foreign language right now. I've studied several foreign languages, but I'm studying Italian for the last year. And it's very difficult for me. And I have such sympathy for students that are trying to learn a new language. And learning the language of music is like learning a language. Rather than just saying things, being able to hear and understand is a really important skill. But you can't just turn on the radio and start listening to somebody talking away. You have to listen to something that is at the level that your ear is ready to process, and then you just keep making that level go up and up and up until you become a native speaker. So that I think is a really gradual process that students should not be. Students are usually afraid of ear training. They hate it. They're scared to death of it, and they're also scared to death of keyboard harmony, and they're scared to death of improvisation. And I think you just have to get over it and be prepared to make mistakes. It's good for the soul to learn to do things wrong and then get better at them and do them better at another time. I have mostly used movable do in my sight singing teaching, which I find is really valuable because it requires that you are analyzing what you're doing. If you sing do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, mi, fa, fi, so. If you're singing the syllables, you're actually identifying exactly what notes. I don't know what key was it. Yeah, I was there. So I mean, I know what notes, and I could, I know I could play that in any key because I understand how those syllables work in the context of a major scale. And that extends to harmonic progressions as well. If I wanted to play, or I mean, I can play the same progression in any key I'd like to because I understand how all of those pieces fit together in an abstract way. It takes some practice, but it's training that really helps apply to many other things. So don't be afraid. I think the people that have, what I've heard is all the people that have perfect pitch, as they get older, the perfect pitch, they get problems with it. They hear things in the wrong key and all sorts of things. That doesn't happen to people that don't have perfect pitch.
Okay, all right. So it doesn't really matter about the year
No.
and also the age, right? And some people thinking they are too old to learn the composition or something.
No, once again, I think it has to do with finding something that is at the appropriate level. That's what you really need.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
We have another question?
Yeah, and just a final question for myself. Like, I have some students, they are interested in eventually they are going to the music school to learn the composition, and they are asking me like how when they apply the for example to your school there, what kind of products need.
What's required of a portfolio? Yeah. So the portfolio that's required for someone that's going to study composition varies tremendously. And what my teachers always told me is it's better to have a small number of really good compositions than to have a big pile of stuff that nobody wants to listen to. So if certain places are going to be much more competitive than others and will require, if you want to apply to a major conservatory, for the composition program, you probably will need 2 or 3 fairly substantial pieces, probably something for a larger ensemble, not just a couple of piano pieces. But they want to, it's important to know how to write for the piano. That's a really basic skill that composers need to know. But knowing how to write for the piano, knowing how to write for the voice, knowing how to write for the orchestra, that kind of covers it. Because, and if you know how to write for the orchestra, you can take any one of those instruments and combine it with your knowledge of writing for the piano, and you have a sonata. So, a couple of different pieces are important. But it's also important, someone that's being introduced to the study of composition the first piece that they write should not be their portfolio piece for their graduate program. You've got, you have to start small. You learn how to, think of the way that little children learn to read and write. They in when they're 5 and 6 and 7 years old, they are writing stories. But those stories are not going to get them into graduate school. But they're not starting on a novel. They're learning to write a couple of simple sentences. So, what you need to do is, again, find the level that you're at and try to move that forward. And then if you move that forward with the best work that you've done, and you want to go to school to study composition, all you can do is take your best work and see where it will get you.
So I realize on your group lesson you have 12 lessons per section. Like they will be able to create a song, even a small song, the repertoire.
Yes. 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 And the other thing is that when we put together a little group, we would want to make sure that we're very clear about what everyone's goals are. Because not every group will have the same goals. Not every student will have the same goals. This is the advantage of a program like this is that we are not restricted by a curriculum. When I teach music theory at Queens College, and there are 6 different semesters, there are 6 different levels. Each one of those has a very specific curriculum that I'm supposed to cover. If I'm teaching Theory 3, I do diatonic harmony, I do third species counterpoint, I do these keyboard. There's the students have to do this because it's one step along a 6-semester long process. But in this context, we're gonna, 12 lessons is long enough to get some work done. And it could always lead to another 12 lessons if that's what the student wants to do and if there's time. But we can simply customize what it is that the people want to do so that it takes them on the next step of their journey. That would be my goal.
Yeah, I saw one of the friends chatting online. The question online said, "This person and she or him don't know any instrument yet, and I think is adult, and she's wondering if they can learn the composing skill when they have no any experience play any."
I would say no. I mean, I think if you sing. I mean, if she doesn't, this person does not play an instrument. Do they sing? Are they able to sing and carry a tune? If they can do that, then the first thing you need to do is to learn notation. If you're going to compose, means to write something. You have to write down what it is that you have created. So you would have to learn notation, and you would have to learn. You wouldn't have to learn how to become an opera singer, but you would have to be able to sing, to be able to create, and then you would be able to create, write little pieces for the voice, for solo voice. But unless you're able, and then if you were going to write for more than one voice, how do you know what that's going to sound like? Unless you go to the piano and sit and play the 2 different voices. You can only sing one thing at a time. So look, there are very famous examples, of people that don't read music. Paul McCartney of the Beatles very famously does not read music. Well, if you're Paul McCartney, you don't need to learn how to read music. But for the rest of us mere mortals, learning to read music and learning to play an instrument is a prerequisite, I think, to be able to compose.
Yeah, at least in writing something.
Yes, you have to know how to notate. So I mean, it's possible, but the first thing we're going to do is not going to be compose. There's a lot of steps that would have to happen first.
Yes. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I have to say that I tried copying the some of these links and they didn't work. I don't know what happened. Let's try another one. Because when I go into there's one. Okay, so there's a YouTube link.
Yeah.
And here's these are my compositions. And then these are if you wanted to listen to one of these student compositions. I guess the whole thing didn't want to go in. Sorry, I thought that it was going to work differently.
It's working.
Now it's working, but I have to copy each one individually. So people can click on these, and these are either my students or my own compositions. And there's lots more if people would like to. They can copy those, or I think there's a button you can save the chat. If people click on the 3 little dots, there's a choice that says save the chat, and then each person's computer will download all of the things that are in the chat, which will include those links.
Yeah. So yeah, I believe all the students and parents will really enjoy it.
Well, that's great. Okay. Any other questions?
I think that's all.